because it was really fascinating to see how strong the opinions were.
Chill out.
No, I'm not here to tell people to chill out.
I am.
Before the sun had even risen on day 1, Special Forces Season 4 was already proving it didn't need a single obstacle course to stir the pot. The cast hadn't been stripped of their phones yet, and you could still feel the divide forming in the air. Social media was buzzing with cast members hyping one another up. Little fire emojis. "Can't wait to crush it with you" comments, inside jokes bouncing from post to post. But there was one glaring absence in the applause section. No tags, no shoutouts, no public affection aimed toward Kody Brown. And then came the moment that set the tone. A casual chill-out comment from another contestant, tossed into the conversation like a pebble, but hitting with the weight of a brick for viewers already primed to watch the dynamics unfold. Sources claim the remark wasn't aimed like a dagger. It was more of a breezy reminder to keep the reactions to the cast reveal in perspective. But for fans who know Kody's history of bristling when his authority is questioned, it felt like the very first challenge of the season wasn't on the training ground, but in the arena of egos. On a show where hierarchy means nothing and respect has to be earned in the mud and heat, any perceived demand for deference is bound to hit resistance. And when that pushback comes before the first drill sergeant even calls the group to order, well, that's a storyline you can't buy. It's important to remember, Special Forces is built to break down anyone who walks in thinking past accolades will buy them an easier path. Every participant is reduced to the same uniform, the same rules, the same unforgiving standard. No one cares which show made you famous or how long you've been on television. The only thing that matters is whether you can carry your own weight and sometimes someone else's without cracking. So when the pre-show chatter seemed to position Kody as the odd man out socially, and then the chill outline dropped, insiders whisper it was like a spark landing on dry grass. The irony is that this was all happening before the cameras captured a single rope climb or forced march. No one had been yelled at by instructors yet, no one had been ordered into freezing water, but reputations? They were already being shaped.
And Kody himself has said that we will see him full on sobbing.
For women who've lived long enough to see how group politics can shift on a single comment, the setup felt almost too familiar. A man who's used to steering the conversation suddenly in a place where that steering wheel doesn't exist, paired with a cast that seems just fine without him leading. And if this was the vibe while everyone was still clean, caffeinated, and connected to the outside world, just imagine what it was going to look like when the comforts disappeared and the only respect you got was the kind you earned one punishing task at a time. The thing about Special Forces is that the competition doesn't always start on the training ground. It can start in the quiet corners of social media, before anyone has even laced up their boots. In the days after the cast announcement, fans noticed something that felt almost too pointed to be coincidence. Instagram feeds were lighting up with castmates congratulating each other, dropping hype comments, tagging one another in stories, and building that "we're all in this together" energy you see before a big shared challenge. Except those same good vibes seemed to take a sharp detour when it came to Kody Brown. No mentions, no playful banter, not even a "let's go" under his own announcement post. Insiders whisper this wasn't some orchestrated snub. More likely, it was the natural result of personalities gravitating toward each other in the lead-up. But perception matters, and to anyone watching from the outside, it sent a message. When you're one of the only names in the lineup not getting that pre-show boost, it can look less like bad luck and more like the first sign of a disconnect. And once people start framing you as the outsider, it's a label that's hard to shake, especially in a show where unity is part of survival. It didn't help that other cast members were clearly enjoying the online camaraderie. Gia Judute was trading encouragement with multiple contestants, building the kind of rapport that can translate into trust once the drills begin. Teresa Judute, her mother and fellow competitor, was pulling the same weight in the comment sections, showing that even before the uniforms came out, alliances, or at least affinities, were taking shape. When you stack that against a quiet feed on Kody's side, the contrast sharpens.
There are a lot of people who are like, I'm not watching the show because so-and-so's on it or whatever. I would challenge that.
For longtime Sister Wives viewers, this social freeze-out felt almost like deja vu. A man accustomed to having an automatic inner circle suddenly finding himself without that built-in support system. On Special Forces, that's more than just an awkward start. It's a vulnerability. If your fellow recruits don't feel naturally drawn to you, it can mean fewer people stepping up when you're struggling to haul a sandbag through knee-deep water or scale a wall in the dark. And that's where the danger lies. Perception becomes reality fast in an environment like this. If your peers believe you're hard to connect with, they may not try as hard to connect, and when the tasks get brutal, that gap widens until it's more than just a social hiccup, it's an actual disadvantage. The Instagram silence was just the first red flag. The next came when one of Kody's fellow contestants decided to talk, carefully but unmistakably, about someone who could get under your skin. It was one of those moments where the words themselves were harmless, but the space between them told a bigger story. Just days after the Special Forces Season 4 cast was announced, Gia Giudice took to her Casual Chaos podcast to share her excitement about the experience. She gushed about the challenges, praised the strength and spirit of the group, and spoke warmly about how everyone motivated each other. Then came the sentence that made listeners lean a little closer. I can't even name one person that I really did not get along with on this cast, but there were definitely some people who could get under your skin a little bit. She didn't offer a name, and she didn't need to. The internet loves a breadcrumb, and with the social media freeze-out already fresh in fans' minds, they didn't waste a second connecting the dots. Comment sections lit up with speculation, threading her careful phrase directly back to Cody. Insiders whisper it wasn't meant as a hit piece. Gia's too seasoned in reality TV circles to drop something incendiary without a purpose, but the placement of that remark was enough to plant the seed. The power of a line like that is in its flexibility. If Gia wanted to downplay it later, she could say it was about minor annoyances, the kind that happen when you're under stress and everyone's operating on little sleep. But in the preseason buzz, it worked like a match to kindling. For a show like Special Forces, where the stakes are both physical and social, fans were now primed to watch for any flash of tension between Gia and Cody, even if the cameras never caught anything explosive. And while Gia's comment was subtle, the context made it louder. Her mother, Teresa, had nothing but praise for the group. The two of them were clearly bonded and comfortable, the kind of pairing that thrives under pressure. Set that against the image of Cody, solo, on the outskirts of the pre-show social dynamic, and the contrast practically wrote its own subplot.
And every single person we talked to that had done it said it was way, way harder than it even shows in the edits.
Yeah.
Like 10 times harder.
In reality TV, perception is half the game, and by now the perception of who fit and who didn't was already taking shape. For Cody, this meant walking into Morocco with a spotlight that wasn't entirely of his own making. The audience was already watching for signs of friction, primed to interpret even a harmless exchange as part of a bigger feud. And in a competition where teamwork can decide whether you finish a task or end up in the failure lineup, that's a dangerous way to start. But if Gia's breadcrumb stirred curiosity, what came next from another castmate turned that curiosity into something much closer to confirmation. If Gia's podcast remark was a breadcrumb, then Brianna Chicken Fry's answer in a fan Q&A was the flashing neon arrow pointing straight at the heart of the drama. During an Instagram Ask Me Anything, the Barstool podcaster didn't dance around her experience. She was asked point blank about Cody, and her response was short, unvarnished, and impossible to misinterpret. She and Cody didn't exactly get along. No qualifiers about under pressure or it was all in good fun. Just a simple statement that drew a line between them. For Special Forces viewers, this was a gift. Brianna's bluntness gave shape to the tension that had so far only existed in hints and guesses. Now it wasn't just fan theory. Here was a cast member confirming there was at least some kind of disconnect. Insiders claim it wasn't the kind of fiery clash that leaves everyone in camp talking, but in a show where you're constantly thrown into pairs and teams, even a quiet incompatibility becomes impossible to hide. And because Brianna's reputation leans candid and unapologetic, her words carried weight. It's worth noting that she'd had no trouble clicking with others in the cast, Gia among them. In fact, their friendly rapport stood out in early behind-the-scenes chatter. That made her comment about Cody stand out even more. In an environment designed to forge unlikely bonds, he seemed to be one of the few people left without one. On a program like Special Forces, that's not just socially awkward, it's strategically risky. Your fellow recruits are the ones who will pull you over a wall when your arms give out or cover your blind spots during a night drill. If they're not invested in your success, every task feels twice as heavy. And for viewers, the optics were clear. Here was a man stepping into a team-based survival course with two co-stars already, in different ways signaling they weren't fully aligned with him. It didn't take much imagination to picture how that might play out once the uniforms were on and the instructors were barking orders. All of this was happening before the first day's briefing, before the sleep deprivation, before the real grind began. The social temperature was already rising, and the uniform wasn't even dirty yet. But once the kit was on and the rules took effect, there would be no hiding behind comfort items, personal routines, or phone calls to vent. The conditions ahead were going to strip everyone down, literally and figuratively, and that's when reputations either harden or crumble. And that stripping down process, it started with rules that made even the toughest contestants flinch. Special Forces doesn't just challenge your body, it dismantles your comfort zone piece by piece. Sean Johnson East and Andrew East, one of the married couples in this season's lineup, gave a detailed look at what those first hours are really like, and the rules are enough to make even seasoned reality veterans take a deep breath. Everyone gets the same exact uniform and the same regulation gear. There's no personal flair, no favorite hoodie, no lucky sneakers tucked in your duffel. You're allowed 5 personal items: toothpaste, deodorant, a hairbrush. Those are the basics. That doesn't leave much room for anything sentimental, and it certainly doesn't allow for the little luxuries you lean on to feel like yourself. Phones, gone. Internet, non-existent. Books, music, any way to pass the time that doesn't involve staring at the walls or your fellow recruits? Not happening. Sean and Andrew admitted it was 10 times harder than it looks, and that's coming from people who walked in knowing what they'd signed up for.
And one of my favorite things about this show when it started was they strip you down to nothing.
For someone like Cody, insiders whisper, the adjustment may have been sharper. Over the years, he's cultivated a public image where control over presentation is key. How he looks, how he speaks, how the story is told. Strip away the hair products, the curated wardrobe, the ability to phone a friendly voice for a boost, and you're left with the unvarnished version of yourself. On Special Forces, that's exactly what the instructors want. The uniformity isn't just about making everyone equal. It's a deliberate psychological tactic. If you can't express yourself through what you wear or own, the only thing left to set you apart is how you act. Every word, every reaction, every gesture becomes your calling card. For some, this is liberating. For others, it's like walking around without armor. And the thing about armor is you don't realize how much you depend on it until it's gone. In those early hours, when the novelty of the experience still has a shine, it might feel manageable. But as the days pass and the drills grind on, not having those familiar touchstones can start to chip away at morale. That's where the bonds you form, or fail to form, start to matter even more. Gia and Teresa had each other. Brianna found her people quickly. Without a built-in ally, Cody was staring down the reality of weathering those long, comfortless days on his own. And as it turns out, the stripping down wasn't just physical. Before they could even touch the first obstacle, the entire cast had to go through a process designed to peel back every layer they thought they could hide behind. If the loss of personal comfort strips away your outer armor, the Special Forces psych evaluation aims straight for the inside. Before anyone hoisted a rope or ran a single drill, each contestant was required to undergo a psychological screening that, according to Sean and Andrew East, was far from superficial. These weren't quick check-the-box chats about mental preparedness. The evaluators, they said, came armed with information, headlines, personal history, even the kind of mistakes most people prefer to keep off camera. And their job wasn't to politely sidestep those topics, it was to press on them until they found out exactly what made you squirm. Instructors on the show aren't just testing your physical endurance, they want to see what happens when emotional and mental stress pile on top. Insiders claim these evaluations become a kind of blueprint, giving the staff a sense of where each recruit might break and how to push them to that edge. For some contestants, this can be transformative, an opportunity to face down a truth they've been avoiding. For others, it's a confrontation they'd rather delay indefinitely. For Cody, this layer of scrutiny may have been particularly thorny. With more than a decade of reality TV behind him, his personal life has been public in a way few can relate to. The family dynamics, the separations, the lingering resentments, they've all been documented for the world to see. On Sister Wives, he's been able to steer the narrative, or at least push back against it. Here, the narrative isn't his to control. If the instructors decided those fractures were worth probing, he'd have to respond in real time, with no chance to edit or redirect. It's also worth noting the timing. This season filmed in early summer, and sources say much of Cody's family only learned about his participation when the public did. If that's true, he walked into those evaluations with fresh tension waiting for him at home. That's not the kind of emotional baggage you can leave at the barracks gate. It follows you, and in the high-pressure ecosystem of Special Forces, it can show up in ways you don't expect. The evaluations set the stage for more than just personal growth. They can influence how others in the group see you. If you're perceived as guarded, defensive, or evasive during those initial sit-downs, it can shape the way teammates interact with you once the real tests begin. And for someone already arriving with a hint of outsider status, that can deepen the gap. Still, nothing in the evaluations could prepare Cody for the reality that he'd be facing these challenges without the support network others had in camp, and that absence was about to become painfully obvious. Once the drills began, it didn't take long to see where the natural partnerships had formed. Gia and Teresa Giudice were the most obvious example, moving in sync without needing to speak, anticipating each other's next move, and offering the kind of encouragement that only comes from years of shared history. When one stumbled, the other steadied her. When one's pace slowed, the other adjusted without complaint. It was quiet, instinctive teamwork, and it was magnetic to watch. Brianna Chicken Fry had found her lane too. She gravitated toward cast members who matched her energy, laughing between tasks, swapping stories during the rare moments of downtime. Even under the strict no-comfort rules, those small social wins created a cushion against the grind of the program. Every shared smile, every "you got this," chipped away at the isolation Special Forces is designed to create. Cody didn't have that cushion. With no pre-established ally in camp and little visible rapport forming in those early days, he was left to navigate the challenges on a partner-by-assignment basis. Insiders whisper that in a show built on teamwork under extreme stress, that rotating door dynamic can be exhausting. You're constantly recalibrating to someone new, figuring out their strengths, their weak spots, their tolerance for blunt direction or quiet support. And if your partner already has doubts about you or has heard the chatter, you're starting at a disadvantage before the first obstacle. It's not just about morale. In Special Forces, trust is practical currency. When you know someone has your back, you're willing to push a little harder, take a little more risk. Without that trust, self-preservation kicks in. Partners focus on their own success, and teamwork becomes a box to tick rather than a lifeline to cling to. The difference shows in the way challenges are tackled and in the way instructors read the group. For viewers, the optics were stark. One side of the camp was trading encouragement and private jokes. The other side, where Cody often found himself, looked more like a solitary march through a hostile landscape. And as the days wore on, those alliances only grew stronger. The real test, though, came when the physical uniform stripped away the last vestiges of individuality, and there was nowhere left to hide but behind your actions. By the time the first few nights had passed, the novelty of Special Forces had worn off, and the reality had settled in. Everyone looked the same. Fatigue stained from drills, boots scuffed from uneven terrain, hair plastered down from helmets or sweat. With makeup banned and personal style erased, there was no visual shortcut to stand out. The only thing separating one recruit from another was how they carried themselves under pressure. This is the stage where character starts to outshine charisma. In the absence of polish, every choice becomes more visible. Who quietly takes on extra weight in a group carry, so a struggling teammate can keep pace? Who steps forward to volunteer for a task no one else wants? Who keeps their head when the instructions are barked fast and loud, and everyone's pulse is already racing? Those are the details the instructors notice, and the audience too. Gia and Teresa thrived in this stripped-down environment. Their encouragement didn't need a camera-ready smile to land. It came through in the way they moved together, the way they problem-solved as a pair. Their partnership became a steady rhythm in the chaos, and it was hard not to contrast that with those who seemed to be working more for themselves. For Cody, the sameness of the uniform may have been its own challenge. On Sister Wives, he's often been able to lean on presentation, body language, styling, a certain way of framing his role in a scene to reinforce his authority. Here, those cues were gone. Every recruit had the same mud streaks, the same scrapes, the same heavy pack digging into their shoulders. There was no visual reminder of past status, no shorthand to tell the group, "Follow me." Respect had to be earned moment by moment, with actions that couldn't be edited in or out later. Insiders claim this is where subtle patterns began to emerge. Some recruits leaned into the group dynamic, offering help before it was asked for. Others, possibly wary of overextending, kept their focus tight on their own survival. And in a place where teamwork is a survival tool, that difference was noticed. The instructors have a way of magnifying those dynamics, pushing the people who cooperate into leadership roles and testing the ones who resist it with even harder scenarios. But nothing magnifies a dynamic quite like raw emotion, and when Cody himself hinted to the public that we'd see him full-on sobbing, it set off a whole new wave of curiosity about what had happened inside that camp. It wasn't a leak from production or a sly hint from another contestant. It was Cody himself who planted one of the season's most intriguing seeds. In preseason chatter, he revealed that viewers would see him full-on sobbing during Special Forces. It's a striking admission, especially from someone who spent over a decade on television carefully balancing vulnerability with control. And in this setting, tears aren't just about emotion, they're about hitting a limit. Special Forces is engineered to strip you down to your raw state. The physical demands are brutal, but it's often the mental grind that breaks people. You're sleep deprived, you're constantly cold or overheated, your muscles ache in ways you can't stretch out, and there's no escape from the group dynamic, good or bad. Add in the complete lack of outside contact, and small frustrations have a way of becoming enormous. When the dam finally breaks, it's rarely over one single thing. It's the weight of everything pressing at once. For some contestants, those moments are transformative. The instructors frame them as breakthroughs, using the collapse as a turning point for building resilience. For others, it's the signal that they've reached the edge of what they can give, and sometimes it's the beginning of the end. The edit will decide which story Cody's tears tell. Will they be framed as the release that unlocks a better version of himself, or as a sign that he never fully adapted to the environment? Meanwhile, contestants like Gia and Teresa seem to keep their emotional center intact, or at least, nothing has emerged publicly suggesting a major breakdown. Their steady demeanor in the face of the same grueling conditions only sharpens the contrast. It's one thing to cry in private after a tough day, it's another to be visibly rattled in a competition where your teammates are deciding moment to moment how much they can count on you. Insiders whisper that in a show this heavily edited, what we see could be just a sliver of a much larger moment. A tearful scene might be preceded by a grueling drill, a conflict with a teammate, or a pointed conversation with the instructors about past choices. Without that context, viewers will be left to interpret and debate what those tears mean. And that debate is exactly what keeps people glued to the screen week after week. But with the premiere fast approaching, one question looms larger than the rest. When the first episode airs, whose narrative will the edit crown? The man fighting to reclaim respect, or the ones who never had to demand it in the first place? By the time late September rolls around and Special Forces Season 4 hits the screen, all of the quiet clues, social media patterns, and whispered tensions will be put to the test under the glare of a polished edit. The raw footage is already in the can, the instructors have already made their calls, and the producers are in the final stretch of deciding which moments to amplify and which ones to leave on the cutting room floor. And this season has two distinct arcs begging for attention. On one side, a man walking in with a decade of reality TV baggage, allegedly demanding respect in an environment where the only rank that matters is the one you earn in the mud. On the other, a mother-daughter powerhouse in Gia and Teresa Giudice, quietly stacking wins in both performance and camp morale without ever raising their voices or issuing ultimatums. The chill-out remark, the Instagram freeze-out, the podcast breadcrumb, the blunt didn't exactly get along from Brianna, the no-comfort rules, the psych evaluations, the absence of a built-in ally, the uniformity that stripped away status, all of it has set the table for a premiere where viewers won't just be watching who passes or fails the drills, they'll be watching the dynamics, who steps into a leadership role without fanfare, who adapts when things don't go their way, and who, when faced with the relentless pace of this show, lets the cracks widen. For Cody, the biggest challenge might not have been the rope climbs or the freezing water. It might have been the shift from being the central figure in his own long-running show to one of many in a squad where no one is impressed by past fame. Respect in Special Forces isn't given for your resume, it's given for carrying the sandbag when no one else can, for hauling your teammate over a wall without complaint, for pushing through when your body is screaming to quit. And if you go in expecting deference without first proving you've earned it, the culture shock can be seismic. Viewers will have to decide for themselves whether the full-on sobbing Cody promised is the sign of a genuine breakthrough, or the punctuation on a story about clashing with a culture that doesn't bend for anyone. Either way, the first episode is set to answer the season's central question: does respect follow the loudest demand or the quietest consistency? So what do you think? Will the edit frame Cody's arc as a redemption story, or as the cautionary tale of a reality veteran who couldn't adjust to a new game? And if you had to survive in those barracks, stripped of comfort and status, would you fight for respect or let your actions speak for themselves? Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video on your screen is waiting, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.